We start with Giuliani's, of course, whopper. Tom Ridge served as the first Homeland Security Secretary, and former Director of National Intelligence John Negroponte is the Vice Chair of the McClarty Associates now. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I don't want to do a lot of partisanship tonight, but there has been some today. What does Rudy Giuliani mean when he denies, well, let's watch him here, when he denies there was an attack on Bush's watch?
What he should be doing is following the right things that Bush did. One of the right things he did was treat this as a war on terror. We had no domestic attacks under Bush. We've had one under Obama.
Is that a mental error, a head fake, or a game that's being played by the Republican Party to somehow act like 9/11 wasn't part of the problem?
I think you're going to have to ask Rudy. Maybe he meant the second term. All I do know is that...
But you don't think there's a game out there being played that somehow the shoe bomber and all these things happening since 9/11 are Democrats' problems, and everything before were Democrats' problems as well?
No, I hope not. I mean, it's political theater, sometimes at its best, sometimes at its worst. Both parties have used the politics of terrorism to advance an agenda, but there's much bigger issues right now that we ought to be talking about. And I would rather have Rudy out there saying President Bush made the FBI the tip of the spear on our counterterrorism effort. It was President Bush that created the NCTC that's had some problems over the past couple months. It's President Bush that beefed up the CIA. There are a lot of good things that he should be talking about, but suggesting that there was nothing happened on President Bush's watch, I think perhaps he misspoke, and I think he needs to clarify it, not me.
Mr. Ambassador, what do you make of Dick Cheney and others' comments that make this partisan?
Well, I mean, I'm a career professional. I happen to be a Republican, but I'm concerned about foreign policy, national security, and intelligence. And there are a lot of big issues out there, and I think that's probably the more important thing to be talking about.
Okay, let's get to it.
Okay.
Everybody, I remember reading, like all of us, we grew up with the Bay of Pigs, with the Cuban Missile Crisis. We've seen how presidents learn on the job. We've seen how we all have to learn. And certainly we learn as citizens, we learn as journalists. You folks in public life have to learn. Politics is a learning profession. What happened, do you think, with the CIA when a father comes into the Lagos Bureau, the station chief, and says, my son's dangerous, he's got something going on with Yemen? And then you find that in Yemen, at the same time, the Yemen station chief is hearing at the CIA, my God, there's a Nigerian they're going to use for some kind of attack. Why didn't those two station chiefs talk to each other and compare notes?
Yeah, I'm not sure that they did or didn't. I don't know what exactly they did. I guess what I'd say is that, as John Brennan has said, these were fragments. They were dots.
But they weren't fragments. They were. A father comes in to the head of a foreign intelligence service and says, my son is dangerous. That's not a fragment.
Yeah,
that's a human situation. You go, my God, some big banker in this country, one of the big shots in this country, just warned us his son is dangerous and brought this information to our CIA. That's not a fragment. That's not a dot on the screen.
But my point is simply, do you draw from that the fact that he said his son is dangerous, that he's ipso facto the terrorist?
No, but you call Yemen and say, have you heard anything about that kid who's gone up there? Is he causing trouble? And you find out immediately from the station chief up there, yeah, we're looking for a Nigerian. This must be him.
Yeah, well, my
I bet the president's mad about this. My hunch is that the president's having this kind of conversation with his people. Mike, well, you've been there, you guys.
Well, you know, this is I don't want to say it's an exact analogy, but I know even when we were building that the shop, the Homeland Security entity within the White House, even before we had the department, I had a couple of people that literally would not wait for the next email, not wait for the next fragment of information. But when something seemed unusual, when it broke the norm, when it was an anomaly, they got on the phone. They started tracking down through all those other agencies. And I guess the question is here, not only here in this instance, but with the FBI seeing an email trail between an active duty Army colonel and a radical cleric in Yemen, while somebody just didn't use a little common sense, exercise a little judgment, a little initiative, pick up the phone, ask somebody, what's going on over here?
Aren't you worried about Alaki? This guy's apparently the one who brought into action, recruited Nidal Hassan, the medical officer down in Fort Hood. Then he brought into action this kid in Nigeria. He's out there recruiting right now as we speak and sending people to cause death in America right now, Mr. Ambassador.
Yeah, and we've been concerned about him for a number of years. I mean, he is an American citizen. He's been over there in Yemen for a number of years, and he is a cause of concern. The other thing that bothers me...
I'm worried about American people of Islamic background, particularly, being drawn into this jihad. Aren't you?
Well, that's certainly one of the problems that Europe confronts. That's what the British have seen. I don't think it's happening on the scale in this country that it happened in the UK, but it's a risk. And we've seen now some examples of that, and it's something we got to be alert to.
What do we do about it?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges
is the president right in saying, let's not get into a, well, you heard him yesterday, we're not going to change our country because we got a couple thousand people out there after us.
Yeah, I don't think
what do you think about that? Well, this fight that goes on, the partisan fight, which I have a point of view about it, and you gentlemen certainly will have one too. The president, I mean, the other side, the Republican side, keeps saying, say terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. Pete King is a good guy from New York. He's a congressman. He says, we just have to keep reciting this over and over. Here's Bob Barr, by the way, challenging that. He's the former congressman. He said the sniping at the president by Republicans, including former Vice President Cheney, and by conservative radio and TV commentators borders on, if not passing into asinine. Partisanship truly has pervasively infected our political system when a reasonable, measured, factual, timely, and substantive response by a president to a single security incident, the roots of which clearly indicate long simmering problems that predated his tenure in office, is publicly blasted as irresponsible. Those levering such counterproductive attacks are the ones engaging in irresponsible behavior. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, don't get me. I mean, I think he's done the right thing.
Bob Barr's right, and the president's right.
I think the president has acted responsibly. He's acted in a timely manner. And they're taking corrective steps. It's like the pilot of the airplane getting out, looking at the wingtips, kicking the tires, and showing some leadership in his commander-in-chief role. I think he's probably going to have to do more of that in the weeks and months ahead.
Are you afraid are you afraid as Americans that if you have somebody out there who's constantly sending people out? Well, you've been there with TSA. Well, you've been there as Homeland Security Secretary. When you went to bed every night, you'd be thinking, what would you be thinking what the enemy looks like? Is it a pocket in Yemen, a pocket in Afghanistan? How many pockets are there out there of masterminds thinking against us, plotting and sending out these young people to their death?
Well, I think,
how many are there?
Well, Chris, I don't think we can put a number on it. We just know there's a lot. And I think there is an intersection between cautious language and the real world. I mean, the president yesterday talked about a war against al-Qaeda. I mean, he's really toughened up his language, and I applaud him for that. But he also earlier in the week talked about isolated extremism. We have to get away from it. It's not isolated. It's ongoing. It's global. They're out there actively recruiting every time. And by the way, I thought this report, I read the 6 or 7-page summary. It's open, the disclosure important, the transparency, I think very, very important. And what he's basically said, I think, is the system, frankly, that President Bush built is fine. We didn't use it very effectively, and we better use that system better.
Here's my question. What good does it have to have this sort of cosmic environment like we had in the Cold War growing up together, all of us, where you thought a lot about communism because there was a worldwide effort by some big countries, especially the Soviet Union and all its satellites, wars of liberation everywhere in the world, constantly coming at us. This was a global threat. This thing is a couple thousand people, apparently, al-Qaeda and its related networks, right? What's the average person supposed to do? We don't have the draft. Taxes don't go up. We don't have war bond drives. They never educate us to what to do on airplanes. We're never told to do anything. What are we supposed to do? Just vote Republican? When I listen to people like Cheney, that's all I hear. Get real angry, or Peter King, get real angry, get in a bunker mentality, and vote right wing. That's somehow the solution. But is there something we're supposed to be doing besides hating jihad? I'm just asking, what are the American people supposed to do?
Well,
what are you supposed to do when you get on an airplane? I'm waiting for these guys on either party to say, you got on an airplane and you're a full-bodied male or strong woman or something, you got a job to do. Take down anybody that tries anything. But like in Israel. But nobody ever educates us. They just want us to vote right wing. Yeah. What are you supposed to do in the battle against terrorism? Well, what am I supposed to do? What's anybody supposed to do?
Well, I think...
Except do this. Wave your arms, vote Republican, yell counter jihad.
Well, I think, first of all, I think commentators and analysts and pundits could helpful to follow maybe Barr's suggestion. We need to have a rational thought. We need to put some of this political theater away, put it beside us, and really accept the notion that we as a country have a new norm. You mentioned the Cold War. During that Cold War, the threat was real. Yes, it was. Is the threat with al-Qaeda real? Yes, it is. Is it the same dimension? No. But is it as serious? Yes, because we're part of the homeland has already been a battlefield. Okay. So what are we supposed to do about it? Let's have thoughtful reflection on policy and approaches. And I think we need a little less theater and a lot more thoughtfulness.
And understanding of the threat. I'm glad Tom mentioned the word threat, because we have to understand where it's coming from, how it's behaving. I mean, for example, the threat from Iraq has obviously diminished. We've had considerable success against al-Qaeda there. in the Taliban was taken down in Afghanistan, and now you still have this continuing threat in the federally administered tribal area. Let there be no doubt about it. I think there are people in that area that are still plotting against the United States, and now you're starting to see it move. I think that's the
in Yemen.
That's the big story now. It's moving towards the Horn of Africa and towards.
Okay, gentlemen, we don't have enough time. Thank you.
Great point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be with you.
Mr. Tom Ridge.
Thanks, Ambassador.
Thanks for your service.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.